Hey, it's me. I know this channel has been all over the place lately, but we are back to our regularly scheduled programming today. And if you're new here, welcome. We make these videos to help you understand the Bible more. So if that's something you're into, stay tuned for more. In today's video, we're going to look at one of the most painful stories in the Old Testament, and maybe in all of Scripture, the story of Job. Now, the book of Job is actually the first book in the Old Testament, chronologically speaking, because it comes before Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which all take place during the time of Moses. But the book of Job is placed where it is because it's a wisdom book, which means it was meant to teach people about God, and it uses poetic language to do so. It's not like the historical narrative that follows it, so they put it in between the law and the history to teach people how to think about God. And the main character in the book of Job is a man who is very wealthy. He has lots of livestock and he's got 10 children. He's basically the poster child for blessed, and he's also a godly man, which you would think would make him pretty happy, right? But he's not even in the middle of his story when things go really bad. His kids are killed in a freak accident, and he loses all of his wealth in a massive economic crash. So now he's an impoverished widow with nothing to live for. And that's not even the worst of it. Then he gets covered in boils from head to toe and he's miserable and depressed. No one could be blamed for saying, "I can't take it anymore. Why don't you just kill me?" But that's not what Job says. He doesn't blame God. Instead, he asks a series of questions that have echoed throughout history and landed us with the question for today: why do good people suffer? That's what we'll try to answer today by looking at the story of Job. The story of Job begins in chapter 1. Now, the first thing we need to know about Job is that he is described as blameless and upright, a man who feared God and shunned evil. And we see him praying for his children, which is interesting because they were not blameless and upright. They did what was right in their own eyes, which clearly wasn't right, but Job prayed for them anyway. In fact, we read that Job offered burnt offerings for each one as a way of making atonement for them in case they had done something wrong while they were out doing whatever it was they were doing. Theologically, this is important because it shows us two things. First, it shows us that the problem was not with Job or his family. He was not perfect, neither were his kids, but his imperfections were not the reason for his suffering. Secondly, it shows us that this story isn't about sin and punishment. If that was the case, then Job wouldn't have needed to sacrifice for his kids. They wouldn't have been innocent, but here they are. This story is about a righteous person who suffers. Now, you might say that Job was too righteous to suffer, but listen to what happens in chapter 1, verse 6. One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" And Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Job fears God for nothing. In vain. Are you not fearful of God? For if you will but put your hand on everything that he has, and on his substance, I will make him curse you to your face." Now, this conversation is weird, to say the least, and it seems almost as if Job is being treated like property, like he's being bartered away and sold, like he doesn't even exist. And that's because he kind of doesn't in this passage. He's being talked about behind his back. And the main takeaway for us is that he's a righteous man. But listen to what Satan says in verse 11. "Are you not fearful of God? For if you will but put your hand on everything that he has, and on his substance, I will make him curse you to your face." Basically, Satan is saying, look, let me ruin this guy's life. Let me take everything from him, and I guarantee you he'll curse you. So the point here is that Satan wants to break Job so that he'll curse God. He thinks that the only way to get rid of Job's righteousness is to completely destroy him. And God says, okay, he gives Satan permission to do whatever he wants to Job, except for one thing. Listen to what God says in verse 12. "But Satan went out from before the Lord and struck Job with boils from the sole of his foot to the top of his head." And it's almost as if God is being a little passive-aggressive here, like he's giving Satan free rein, but he also makes sure that Satan doesn't kill him. Otherwise, he would have killed Job. But instead, he gave him boils, which hurt a lot, but didn't actually kill him. The goal was to get Job to curse God, but he never does. Instead, Job asks a series of questions. Remember, The book of Job is a poetry book, and this is Job's way of lamenting his situation and trying to figure out what God is doing. In chapter 3, he curses the day he was born, saying, "Let that day be darkness, and let it not be counted as one of the days of the year. Let it not be included in the number of the months. Let that day be an eternal night. May the stars of the evening be congealed in their orbits, and the sun refuse to give light." And he even wishes he died before he was born, saying, "Oh, that I had died at the increase of my years. I had not known the taste of death, neither had seen any evil at work in Israel, nor had found the sorrow of the grave or the sorrow of the women weeping for their children, for the calamity that happened in Israel." But through it all, he doesn't curse God. He struggles with his faith, but he doesn't deny it. And I think that's important, because suffering can either strengthen our faith or weaken it, and it all depends on how we respond. If we respond by cursing God, turning away from him, denying him, then Satan wins. But if we respond like Job, wrestling with our faith, then we have the opportunity to come closer to God. You see, after Job suffered his greatest loss, the first thing he did was look for answers. He looked to the east and said, "There is hope for a tree that when it is cut down, still has sap in it, that its branches may be renewed, and its roots grow strong in the dust." And then he looks to the south and says, "My heart yearns, my spirit is troubled within me. If only I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away. I would dwell in the wilderness." So Job is looking for an answer, but he's not looking in the right place. He's looking everywhere, except for God. And we see this same pattern in the Psalms. David wrote, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day by day have my enemy triumph over me?" So both Job and David are suffering, and they're asking questions, but they're not asking the right one. Job is asking, "Why am I suffering?" But what he really should be asking is, "What do I do with my suffering?" Because the truth is, no matter how much suffering there is in this world, it cannot compare to the glory of God. And if we keep our eyes on God, he will lead us through it, and that's exactly what Job does. In chapter 42, he realizes his mistake and he repents, and as soon as he does, God blesses him again. So the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than the former, and he had 4 sons and 2 daughters. In his old age, he became very prosperous, and his sons went to live among their sisters in the land of Uz. And he lived many days, and became very old, and he died, a man highly favored and blessed by God. And that's the story of Job.